All right, it's just another Tuesday, just another podcast, and I'm here with Sam. Unfortunately, Alec could not be with us. I actually do not know why, because I think Alec has been on every single podcast up till now, and I miss
It's a
him, I
big
think.
loss.
Yeah, it is a big loss. We lost Austin already, and I don't know if we're losing Alec consistently or if this is just a one-off. Maybe it's because his team's so bad. I don't know. But
He's taking a break from fantasy
taking a
football.
break from fantasy, a mental health break, I think. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. We'll get to Alex shortly. I think it'll be one of our first topics of discussion. I
He's
mean,
going to come around at the same time as Christian McCaffrey. It's just like when Christian McCaffrey comes back, Alec will come back.
hey, designated for return, right? So
Yeah.
next week, if Christian McCaffrey has a 30-point game, I'm sure he'll be on the podcast. Um, that is interesting. I mean, okay, so to to reach Austin in points for, I think it's about a 22 point per game gap he needs to close in the next 5 weeks, right? And that's about a Christian McCaffrey sized hole. So that's that's very interesting to. I don't want to take credit for that. I think Andrew told that to me. We were talking about state of the league and who's going to make the playoffs yesterday or a couple days ago, and yeah, I mean, like he definitely has a chance. Very good chance still. I wouldn't consider maybe very good's overselling it, but he has a chance.
I think if he had had a tougher start to the year from a scheduling standpoint, he might be in a worse hole than he is in right now. But the possibility that gets Christian McCaffrey back to kind of Christian McCaffrey level play. Micah Parsons should be coming back in the next couple weeks. Like this team could easily ratchet back up to that 280, 290, 300 point game performances, which puts them right in the discussion of all the other teams.
Yeah, and if you can just get some, some wins instead of having to rely on the seed protection, then that'll make a big difference as well, of course. I mean, but it's looking a little. I mean, it is so competitive right now for those last few spots in the playoffs. So I'm
Yeah,
not really
I
sure what's going to go down.
mean Andrew's team just topped off for like 330 plus.
Yeah,
My dad's team is randomly scoring 300 in the last couple of weeks here, and we'll get to that later. And
yeah. I mean,
it seems like
4 and 5. That's right on the cusp. That's right on the edge. So, and we have some matchup data here too. So we're going to talk matchups, but I mean, it's not looking that bad for him, right? He has three easy-ish, easy to middle of the pack matchups, but I'd say easy matchups before having to go against me and then Adcock in the last 2 weeks. But if he can pull off one win between me and Adcock and then three wins in three in a row, 10 through weeks 10 through 12, it's not it's not looking that bad, right?
whereas Alec is a lot of red matchups and then one green matchup to end the season. It's looking like.
Yeah, I gotta say, putting the colors in, I mean, very subjective here. I don't know how many people listen versus watch, but I put some color coding on the top eight matchup or the top eight teams and the matchups that we have remaining for weeks 10 through 14. Um, I decided that the top five teams are Reds, or sorry, top six teams are Reds. You know, the true contenders. I gave Adcock a red of his own because let's be real, his team is on its own right now. And then, unfortunately, Alec got relegated into orange category with Shane, Mike, and Zach. So Zach Ford. So I did.
I'm sure he loves being in that company right now.
Yeah, I won't pretend that I didn't enjoy putting him as a different category, but I really couldn't justify him being red. I put him as red
Yeah.
first, and then I wanted to put everybody else as green, and I realized it was more of a middle category, and I realized that Zach Ford at what's his record? At 2 and 7 has the exact same points for as Alec. So
I know that's crazy.
so I figured an orange category was more justified. But obviously CMC coming back changes the whole landscape.
Yeah. I mean, it's just Alex's team is very much injury riddled, and a lot of those guys are kind of his key impact players are coming back from those injuries. So you never know what it's going to be like to have a Micah Parsons infused and Christian McCaffrey infused type lineup. So
Yeah,
I
but
still give Alec the same respect that I would give him most seasons.
the same, maybe not,
Maybe
but
not the same respect, but
because I
knowing that
mean
you
we're
could
talking
potentially give
about
it a
a
go.
guy who's so we're in our fourth season, his first three seasons, um, top of the league 2 seasons. I mean, I think I was top once, but like we were the same level of team, like juggernaut teams. Um, Last season, right up there as well, and it's been maybe the first fall from grace that we've seen. I know it's not over yet because of the injuries, but we haven't really seen that yet. We've seen Kyle go from top four team to whatever he is right now, and but we haven't really seen like the juggernaut fall quite yet,
Mhm.
and it's going to be kind of interesting to see how he responds with that. Like, is he going to sell a little bit? Is he going to? I mean, I'm sure he's going to try to play it out for a few more weeks, but we have the trade deadline going all the way until the end of week 14. I would not be surprised at all if he's trying to sell a few of his older assets. So,
I did look into that today and was wondering when our trade deadline was because the NFL is like ending, in I think the next week here. So it's like, are we coming up on it? Like, because Adcock is one where I kind of think about his team because he has so much ability to trade. And is it like, oh, he only has 2 more weeks to trade, but no, he has the rest of the season to trade. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting.
the trade deadline question is kind of interesting. We at the very beginning, from the start, we wanted the trade deadline to be at the end of the season, at the end of the regular season. And I think I'm not even sure what the I'd have to think about the reasoning, and then we moved it to be back to the end of the season because I think it was bugged or something because it was at the end of week 13 and we moved it to the end of week 14. I kind of got screwed by that when I was trying to trade for a QB 2 years ago. Anyways, I'm it's kind of a conversation for a different podcast, but the pros and cons of having the trade deadline at the very end of the season versus having the trade deadline like week 10 or something, week 11. Um, there's also some some people who really believe in being able to trade through into the playoffs, which I don't like at all. So there's kind of pros and cons to all of them. Namely,
Mhm.
that the rest of the like the non-playoff teams are still able to play the game. I think is part of it. But I don't like somebody being able to shell out all their assets for just a championship at, right before the championship happens, right in the middle of the
Yeah,
playoffs.
it does feel not like a fun thing because that would just be such a power imbalance. I like the idea of it just being for our regular season. We don't have to get too much into it just because we'll probably like discuss this later. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
personally would be against being able to offload talent during the playoffs.
Yeah, I know we kind of butt up against it because like you can trade at the very end up to the very last game of the regular season, but I think it's like a fair compromise, but I'm always open to discussing. I don't think anybody's really had any opinions about the trade deadline, so it's probably at a good spot right now.
Mhm.
All right, so state of the league. All right. So finally, there's a shakeup at the top, not the very top, but actually, has Adcock ever not been in first, or did Todd in first at some point? I can't remember.
We need Austin's graph thing that he made last season where it was kind
Ah,
of showing all the
right.
different positional changes.
Yeah, that was
Uh,
nice. Okay, we'll ask Austin. Austin, if you're listening, and he probably will be later today, please make that again. I don't care about all the chores you have to do. Um, so, so yeah. Anyways, like so, it was a top two of Adcock, more or less for the whole season. Been a top two of Todd and Adcock. I sneaked in to be top two now, so top two gets the buys. That'd be really nice. However, I think this is going to be quite the battle for top two going forward. I have the advantage right now, but I don't really feel confident in keeping it necessarily. It's probably a battle between you, me, and Todd, right?
yeah, I mean, it's looking like that. Just the way things are kind of shaking out here. I play Todd this week, so I could easily jump Todd if I win this. And he, I'm like slowly kind of catching up to him for points for, it seems, where I'm probably like getting 20, maybe points a game since his team has kind of like taken a step back due to injuries. So from a points for standpoint, he's still ahead of me, but I think I'm kind of closing that gap between us.
Yeah, I mean, it's been sub 300 3 weeks in a row now, and we'll kind of see how that goes. But yeah, he's been hit pretty hard with injuries. Probably him and Alec are the worst as far as injury concerns.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's rough. After that, it becomes that interesting race for the 5-6 spots. And it's really weird with 6 seed protection, which probably we can talk about a little. That depending on who gets that 5 seed, then the points for can matter in different ways. So it's actually a pretty interesting race for the last 3 spots. I mean, I think Alec has the worst odds out of the last 3 spots, and I don't want to discount Mike here. Like I think Mike has a very solid chance of getting into those spots as well. It's a little trickier because of 6 seed protection that he needs to catch up as in the points for as well, unless he's going to get that 5 seed. But um, really it's 3, probably 4 competing for 2 spots. I love it. It's the first time we've really seen as much competition um, as this year. Last year it was kind of me and Shane competing for the last couple spots. I think Alec was in the mix. I can't remember exactly, but it came down to Shane and I, and it wasn't that close really. Like I think I had it fairly comfortably at least a couple weeks out, but it was still a question. This season there is there's a lot of questions open, and I love it. I think it's going to be really exciting. I think we should have some trades come through. Maybe people try to make a push. Maybe people try decide that they're not going to be able to make it this year. But I don't know. I like it. This is what I want to see.
Yeah, I would agree. And I feel like you brought up the stat earlier in the group chat in that every team in the league has made the playoffs except my dad. So this will be an interesting, like, can we get all teams as playoff teams with 3 seasons into our league?
So
That would be really.
I want to know was that true? I think it's true. Did you double check me on that one? I think it's
Well,
true.
now, like, looking through it, I would assume all the teams that have, yeah,
Because
like,
Jack has made it. Zach definitely has made it, obviously. Kyle's made it. Shane's made it. And then I don't think Todd has made it. I mean, obviously he hasn't made it. No, he hasn't made it because Todd didn't make it
yeah,
last
that's
year,
true.
and then it
That's
was
true.
Kohansky. However, both him and Adcock are making it this year. Although, has Adcock made it in the past?
Mm,
I'm not
I
sure.
mean, I
Maybe.
don't think so.
Yeah,
I
I'd have
feel
to
like he's
go back
always
and
had
look.
like the 6th pick or the 7th pick or whatever that cut is.
Yeah,
He's been on the wrong side of it.
if he made it, it must have been in year 1, right? Let's
Mhm.
see. How do you even get to it? Oh, there we go. Okay, so he did make it and then got blown out. Well, not even blown out, just he sucked 216 in the round 1 of the playoffs. Okay, so everybody has made it except for Todd and Mike. However, Todd's going to make it this year for sure. I hope. And okay, so Todd's going to make it this year for sure. Mike has a fighting chance, and he probably should have made it year 1. I think Adcock snuck that spot away from him before we had 6 seed protection, actually.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, he has a good chance. It'll we'll see. Let's talk about Mike a little, actually. I say Mike, you say Dad. Let's see what's going on. So it's interesting that this team that I don't know, like who I want to say that everybody pegged them as a bottom 3 team coming into this year.
Definitely. I mean, there was a lot of people who were trying to trade for his picks with that in mind, that
Probably
they were
still
easily
are.
going to be top 3 picks. So,
And I mean, right now, is he third or fourth in the points max points? Let's see. So right now he's fourth. Shane is beating him out slightly. I think Jack and Kyle are going to be unopposed for the top 2 picks. So, but he's been doing really well in the last few weeks. So
mhm.
That's why that's the only like as is. If you look at his stats for the season and his record, you wouldn't really consider him a contender necessarily. It's just that his team has come on in the last few weeks, and that really gives him the potential for actually making the playoffs. Because otherwise, like the points for aren't really there. But sometimes things change really quickly, and if we look into his roster, I mean, it looks like a legit roster all of a sudden, except for maybe the wide receiver core. I mean, maybe definitely the wide receiver core, but you got some legit QBs. Bo Nix, 201, probably the steal of the draft. Definitely the steal of the draft. And Rodgers, who's come on in recent weeks and has been pretty good fantasy wise. Okay, like a legit QB at least fantasy wise for the year. And obviously he was out last season. What has changed here? What has changed in the last few weeks with this roster with the players that has made us talk about him as if he can make the playoffs?
So I think he has some. I mean, if you want to break it down to like a formula of success for like the playoff teams or for the competitive teams, it's having productive startable players at every position. And like QBs, he's got two startable good QBs that are kind of like top 15, top 20 guys. He's got two top 15 running backs and Cook and Mixon. The wide receivers definitely need help and need some work, but Leggett is an intriguing, young prospect, especially now that Deontay Johnson is out of the fold and he's a little bit more of like a target hog type of player. And Joku clearly is kind of the top pass catcher out of Cleveland, so you can assume that he's going to get some good production here moving forward. Defense, I honestly feel like his defense is like playoff caliber tier. He's got some really, really good edges with Verse, Hendrickson, um, who's the Trayvon Walker, and then his linebackers. He's got Campbell, who's kind of coming on into a more consistent role. He's got
Getting a lot more snaps. Yeah, Zaire, famously.
Yeah, worth the first.
And Lloyd, while somewhat inconsistent, has like a lot of potential and is scoring a decent amount of points. So that's interesting.
It's kind of an interesting team from like do you blow this team up and try to trade away older assets, or do you try to go for it and trade for wide receivers? And I will say trading for wide receivers that would be playoff caliber wide receivers would require him to really like go all in from trading first, maybe seconds to get there.
There's a few potential partners though, like Shane in particular. That could be a pairing, right? You got Cup. Does he still have Mike Evans? I think he still does.
Yeah, he has Evans and Cup.
Evans and Cup. I mean, I know Evans was on Mike's team before. Did he trade? He must have traded Shane Evans last year. That must have been how it worked. Or maybe it was 2 years ago. So that might be a potential trade partner. I mean, there's partners out there, So it could be worth it. I mean, you know, it's not a team that has a lot of depth. That's the thing. Like the starting defense looks really good. The starting DNs, I mean, you're talking about definitely like top few teams in the league. I mean, Hendrickson just went off. Walker showing why he was picked number one overall. Finally,
he's been coming on really, really strong.
Really
in
strong.
The last couple weeks here. Yeah,
and I mean he had a strong end to the last season as well. It's been a surprise for me at least, but I'm happy for him. I'm happy for Mike. And it really looks like a nice pick, 206 for Walker. Not bad at all. So and Verse, I mean, yeah, looking amazing as a rookie. So and if you watch him play, I mean, he's one of those guys who kind of like bursts off the screen, So it's really come along here. He's made some, I don't know, maybe like I thought some questionable picks, especially along the ends, but it's really paid off nicely. I don't think Verse was a reach at all at 203. I think that was a really good pick. Trayvon Walker, maybe I didn't really believe in him despite being picked number one overall, and I think that's a mistake. Like we think we're smarter than even like an organization like the Jags. I don't know. So that's interesting. I mean, obviously, like you can question that pick still because they should have drafted Aiden Hutchinson, right? But He's looking great here.
Yeah, I think it brings about the question of, does he get aggressive and try to trade away some of his first, or does he get, you know, take away his point potential and start trading away like Rodgers and Mixon and
It's it's
Ray Hendrickson? Yeah.
it's tricky. It's very tricky because he only has his own firsts left, and things could go bad. I mean, if he doesn't make the playoffs, there's a decent chance that he would be trading away the fourth overall pick. So
Yeah.
making a play like that could be another mistake, just like that has been made in the past, like for Zaire Franklin.
Mm.
It feels like a team that's right on the cusp, but there's no young assets to be able to trade away or not many picks to be able to trade away. So it feels almost incomplete. But if you could sneak into the playoffs, I think it's always worth. Always is probably a strong word, but I think it's more worth sneaking into the playoffs than people think. I think I've talked about this with Andrew. I mean, Andrew's the poster child for that, right? Where he snuck into the playoffs. I think he was the fifth pick or fifth seed, and went on a rampage, right, to win our inaugural year. I mean, that was a really cool thing to watch, especially since I wasn't the one losing to him in the final. But so I'm kind of on board with making small gambles for trying for playoff positions. I think it's worth it. I'm not necessarily on board for making big gambles for playoff positions, though.
Yeah. Overall, very good last 3 weeks out of my dad. Uh, probably averaging somewhere close to like 290, maybe 300 in the past 3 weeks. So that's impressive.
Yeah, no, it's looking good. I hope it continues. I do think the roster overall probably needs some tuning for like balancing short and long term needs, but it's uh it's always good to get those DNs just ripping and running. I mean, that's a good feeling. However, it is the most volatile of the defensive positions, so it kind of comes and goes to some extent, although these are some good ones, I think. So well
Yeah.
done, Mike. I hope you can pass up Alec because that always makes me happy. And I do think let's look at those matchups. Like again, if we're talking Mike having say 3 wins, say he gets like I don't think it's unreasonable to say he gets 4 wins here, right? And then he
Mhm.
becomes 8-5. Uh, and then let's see. So Alec, I don't think it's unreasonable to say like it's not hard to construct a situation like a scenario where he loses 4 of these, wins one, and ends up what is that 6-8? Like it's possible. Um, and then Austin has an easier schedule playing Alec, Todd, Alec, and then Ford and Kyle. I mean, how easy is Ford for Alec even? Like they're at the same points for. So. Oh, sorry. I'm talking about Austin. So Austin probably wins 3 here, right? At the very least.
Mhm.
And so that gets him to 8-4, 8-6. I'm mixing up my math. So, and then Andrew, you could construct a situation where he loses 3. It'd be like a lot of 8 and I feel like there's a lot of 8-6s here. Like I'm seeing a lot of 8-6s out of the bottom 4 here in the 5 through 8. So Mike would have to either get a little lucky or he would have to score a lot of points. Because I'm not even sure. Like you'd have to think about how that's even going to play out. Because if everybody's 8-6, I guess 6 seed protection doesn't even matter anymore. It just becomes automatic, right? So the top 2 point scorers. So I think it's a
Mhm.
tough road. I feel like it's possible. I just think it's looking at the playoff picture, looking at the matchups. I think it's going to be tricky just because of how the matchups are playing out. But I don't think it's impossible either. So, Mike, if you can do
Yep.
it, I think that'd be awesome. So, good luck.
Hmm.
And I say this not having to be in that fray. So, suck it.
Do we also want to talk about like the special teams?
Yes, we
Just
do.
yeah, that whole catastrophe.
All right, I have this as robbery with two exclamation marks. Special teams tackles. So yeah, let's talk about it. So how'd this play out? You
Oh my
realized
goodness.
that there was a discrepancy between the tackle numbers on Sleeper and I think like CBS and ESPN.
Yes. Yeah. So that's kind of how it all started. Is I was up by like that 1.5 points because Fred Warner like got a pass defended in like the last 2 minutes, which was awesome. Uh, I love Fred.
Shout out to
And
Fred.
then shout out to Fred. And then I went to go check through all of like the potential stat corrections that could like come up. So I was like scrolling through every player for my team, every player for my dad's team, and came across two discrepancies. One of which was Bullard from Green Bay Packers, and he was like a DB, and the other one was Jack Campbell. So it said that Jack Campbell had 6 solos and 5 assisted, when in reality on Sleeper it was saying 5 solo, 5 assisted. So that was already something that could like tick towards my dad winning. And then Bullard was like another one where it gave him an additional tackle. So initially I kind of went through the like, shit, I like lost. This is gonna come through as a stat correction for sure. And then like had kind of already like grieved that loss and was ready to go on to the next matchup. And then I was just kind of like looking through my team and looking through the film for Kenneth Murray, who had literally 1 point, played 100% of snaps, 1 point. And it was like the most ridiculous film I've ever seen, in the sense where it's like they were playing the Lions. The Lions had a lot of like short distance fields where, big kick return, big punt return, or there's like a big turnover that put them in like that, red zone right away. So he was like covering Jameer Gibbs. That all to be said, I was like really going through like CBS Sports and like the NFL film through our NFL Plus subscription, and saw that Jack Campbell did not get 6 tackles. It was like 5 solo, 5 assisted. And I didn't actually even catch his special team tackle, but and it didn't come up in the stat sheet either. So it like literally just wasn't even on my radar. But then when I went to look at like Bullard's, I noticed that it was a special teams tackle. So that was kind of like how that all shook out.
And then we finally checked on Sleeper, and I know there's a lot of messages.
Yes.
And yeah, and you know what it turns out to be? I mean, it's on me from 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, not knowing that there was. I mean, I think it's possible too. I don't know if it is actually true that this didn't exist. This probably existed though, realistically. We just didn't know that there was a special teams player scoring setting. I don't even know if it necessarily should be scored. I mean, I'm totally game for giving the proper scoring for solo tackle. Like, I think if if I had, if I was to vote on it right now, I would give 2 points for the solo special team solo tackle. I think it's perfectly justified.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, we just missed it. We didn't know that it was there for 3.5 years, right? And yeah, I'm not. Unfortunately, I definitely am not going to be changing rules like mid-season. We didn't realize this was there from the very beginning. It's just Sam's crazy detective work that your crazy detective work that uh, that we even found this. It's kind of wild that we didn't notice it until now, but it kind of makes sense at the same time. It's just not something that's on our radar.
Are
Special
you telling
teams
me that
tackle.
my anxiety is my superpower here? Where it's
Yeah,
like I was
well,
going.
like with superpowers, there's definitely pros and cons, and the con is when you send me like Charlie, crazy Charlie, like
Conspiracy theories.
still images telling me that one thing was a tackle or one thing was a sack or whatever. Uh, I think about all the time because I think Alec and I were watching something together, and so we decided to go through the film to find the specific tackle that you were claiming as a tackle. And it was such bullshit. Like the still image looked so convincing. We said that was a tackle for sure based on the still image, right? And then when we watched
Mhm.
the video, it was much less convincing. So it was a good attempt though. And this time you were
Yeah,
right though. This time you were right. So
yeah.
good on you. So I think we're going to definitely vote on it. I think forced fumble, fumble recovery for special teams, and solo tackle should all be credited as 2 points personally. So we'll see.
One more thing on the I guess special teams, or just kind of the stat correction,
Hmm.
is that stat correction site for the NFL is actually pretty accurate. So again, if you're really sweating out a win or a close game, you can check there first before it like probably goes live on Sleeper.
Yeah, I think Sleeper has a bit of a delay. It pulls their data. I think I know we were talking about like data sources. Mike was talking about it a little bit. I dug way too deep into this. It sounds like Sport Radar, which is I guess a Swiss company or something, some European company. They have the rights for disseminating like NFL data, and yeah, I mean I think it comes from like Elias Sports Bureau first. They're the ones who like tabulate everything, but then Sport Radar, I guess. I know Sleeper uses them. Um, they actually have the APIs and everything that the betting companies and the fantasy companies, they all use that data. So, in case you were wondering, it's not that interesting, but I figured I'd put it out there. Um, what else
I'm
were we gonna
sure
talk
it'll.
about?
I'll circle back to it if I ever have another moment where I'm really like, what's happening here?
Well, actually, like getting that raw data from Sleeper, which you can get to if you are interested in, you can just look at the network stuff and the dev tools. Um, that was, I mean, that was really nice to see because I'm like, I can see that, oh yeah, it was like Sleeper sees it, it's just a special teams tackle, and that's why it was scored differently. So that helped me figure out what the heck was going on there because I was very confused
Mhm.
as well. I didn't realize that tackles were counted separately in that way. I think that Kyle brought up a good point. I think it was Kyle where we don't count, punt return, kick return yards either. So there are certain things that we treat differently, right? We treat the forced fumble, for fumble recovery, solo tackle for special teams differently than we do for, um, I don't know, regular quote unquote fumbles and tackles. And we do the same thing for punt and kick return yards. I would argue that a special teams tackle is much more similar to a regular tackle than a return yard is to like a receiving yard or a rushing yard. But there is a difference. So I think I want to bring up, at least, just off season, the potential for having punt return, kick return yards. Like I don't think we need to give it a ton of weight because I don't love it necessarily, but I know some people in the league are interested. Like maybe we don't give them full scoring, but maybe it's interesting to give them half scoring or something. I don't really know. I haven't thought about it more than just it just came to my mind. Do you have any thoughts on like return yardage?
I had like one kind of closing thought on the tackle is more often than not, the special teams defenders are guys who aren't necessarily getting meaningful snaps in like the regular defense. It's just kind of an interesting situation with Jack Campbell, who's like really coming on from a linebacker standpoint and actually getting meaningful snaps with the Lions. He was to some regard last year, but he's still somehow playing on special teams. Then Bullard, rookie this year, probably was a special teams guy who's getting more snaps. So more often than not, the special teams defenders aren't necessarily going to be guys you want to roster, but there's these interesting like uh, players who are quickly coming on who are still getting special team snaps, but also getting a good amount of regular defense snaps. So I think this is kind of like a moot point overall, but it's interesting for those guys who are like rookies or second year guys who are still getting special team snaps for defenders.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Like it is a special subset of players that would benefit from either of these situations, and it's not quite the same subset that we tend to roster. It's more likely, like you were saying, that you roster a guy who's doing returns and is valuable in fantasy than somebody who's really getting a lot of value out of special teams tackles. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Andrew said that Owusu Karaboa was a special teams guy, which I think is interesting because he's like was the 100% snap guy for Cleveland this season. So that's an interesting little like outlier. But most of the like Fred Warner doesn't play special teams. You know, I'm trying to think of like Foye doesn't play special teams. Like all these like big set and forget guys aren't necessarily your special teams guys.
Yeah. You know what we should score? I don't think there's any mechanism for this, but you see like Justin Jefferson catching on the hands team, catching the onside kick. Like that should be scored.
I mean, it is a meaningful play. So.
uh, yeah, points per block, get the offensive lineman in our league, stuff like that. Yeah.
We're just inching towards adding the offensive line guys.
One of the offensive linemen for the Bears got a good -2 out of that fumble at the goal line. So,
That was a dumbass play, but
oh Christ! All right,
all right. I think
moving
we're on to
on.
trades.
Trades. All right,
Yeah.
what do we got here?
I guess
So
since they're all my trades,
they're
we can
all
kind of
your
just like
trades. Oh,
I
let's
can give
let's start
you.
with this first. Were there any trades in the last 2 weeks, I think, since our last podcast that weren't your trades?
No, I actually scrolled through and they're all my trades.
All right, let's start with the McLaurin trade. I'll pop it up. What are you thinking?
Do I? Yeah, I guess just give the rationale or like kind of what my thought process was. So,
Let's read what the trade was first. So Levante David and Terry McLaurin for a 27 first, and whose 27 second is that?
uh, I think that just might be mine.
Hmm. Okay. Whose first is that then? I was just saying team one.
Also mine.
Okay. Okay.
Or actually, that might have been Austin's or Alex.
Hmm.
Now that I think about it.
Okay. Whatever team one is. 2027 second. Who's trading their 27 second already? Yeah.
Austin and Alex,
Yeah, I
or
guess.
Austin and you actually.
Have I?
You traded me yeah, for ETN.
Ah, right. Hey, I like that trade. All right, we can talk about that one too, maybe.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Okay.
You know what? I'll give you my thoughts real quick, and then you tell me your thoughts. I think that'll be the proper way to go through it. So
Okay.
Levante David and Terry McLaurin. So McLaurin, producing this year, looking good. Uh, he was traded for two firsts in the past, if I recall correctly. 29, older, but yeah, fits a nice hole in your roster, like getting some nice points in there. And then Levante David putting that in as well. I love it. I think it's great. I think you're getting a ton of points. I know Levante David hasn't scored a ton in the last 2 weeks, but he will. He will. Levante David is inevitable. And I gotta say, overall, I like the trade. 2027 firsts are a long way out, and you'll. I'd feel confident in competing over the next 2 years, which takes you into getting your first again the year after. So no problems for me. I'm liking it. I think I like it for both sides overall. I think Shane obviously needs to get rid of David because he can retire any year, and McLaurin definitely is not a player that I'd want if I'm Shane. So I'm not unhappy either way.
Yeah, I think your how you kind of like saw this trade is also how I ultimately like saw this trade. I identified very much that I needed like a better wide receiver than Deontay Johnson, Michael Pittman, as kind of that like wide receiver like three mix where it's like I have DJ Moore, I have DK Metcalf, I have McLaurin, and I have Cortland Sutton. And it was kind of like, all right, like I'm not feeling too confident with like the third wide receiver, so I went out and like paid, a high price but a necessary price to get someone who is, producing at a top 10 wide receiver at the moment. And yes, I know it kind of pigeonholes my overall like it kind of sets me into like you need to win within the next 2 to 3 years with this team because it's a lot of people who are like 27, 28, 29. They're kind of coming to like peak. So it definitely has defined my championship window, but I'm also okay with that where it's like I'm willing to kind of like go all in, put the chips on the table and compete this year and next year and the year after that rather than hold on to draft picks. And maybe not have as productive as a team as a result.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think competing now and competing like I think having that 2, maybe 3 year window is a really good mindset to have if you have the players. It maybe it keeps you sharp too, right? You're looking for any UDFAs and anybody you can get low in the draft and making smart decisions to try to extend that window. I think it's a lot of fun doing that, and it I think staying within the playoff picture is just really important because anything can happen. So overall,
Hmm.
I like the trade. It is, I shouldn't undersell how scary it is to trade those picks that are so far in the future, though. So,
Yeah,
because things can fall apart quick in the NFL
yeah,
and in fantasy.
yeah. I am concerned about just generally trading away those, and like I for the longest time kept it as kind of like my emergency break glass if you really need this. And I think just as the season was progressing, I started looking more and more at like my wide receivers and like, damn, I need another like guy in the top 15, top 20 wide receivers that I can just slot in every week to really like up my points.
Yeah.
So
Hey,
yeah,
looking good. I'm with you. I am, hey guys, everybody listening, I'm shopping my 27 first, so just FYI. So, all right. Next trade is a smaller one, but an interesting one. Mac Khalil. Um, what was it? A third and a fourth. Ah, okay. So I thought it was a fourth and a fifth, but it was a third and a fourth. I think it's fair value. I know that Zach wanted a first for Khalil Mack at least last year, which is kind of
I know.
fair. 342 points. I mean, that was a monster season. What was did he score 60? 77. Oh my God. But he
Can
had a
you
good
save
season
that for the
besides that
championship
too.
games?
I mean, what a monster season to score 77 in one game, and still, if you subtract that from like his whole season total, he still had a monster season. Like, wow. So, yeah. Um, was that a difficult trade to get done? I don't know if Zach was still like asking for more.
No, it was so I like kind of shot that third and fourth to both Kyle and Zach where I had like two concurrent trades going. So I, was talking about it was like talking trade with Kyle for Jamie and Sherwood. And was going to use like a third and a fourth for Jamie and Sherwood, and then through that same trade for Khalil Mack. And like as I was, working throughout the day, I like went back to Sleeper and saw trade completed, and I'm like, all right, which trade is going to be? And it was Khalil Mack. So I'm definitely not disappointed in that return or like trading those pieces for Khalil Mack.
No, it's a nice season. Max putting together. Like you're gonna get production. Um, I don't even know who's playing on the other side of Khalil Mack because I know that Joey Bosa's been injured this whole goddamn year, like every fucking year. So it,
It's Tuli Tuipulotu, I think. He was like
oh, the
the
draft pick, right?
yeah.
When was he drafted?
Who I also have on the team.
Ah,
2 years ago, I
oh, he's
believe.
drafted 2 years ago. Okay, is he producing this year? Out of curiosity. Oh,
Yeah, he had a good pop week this last week.
where is he at? Hmm, interesting. Yeah, because like Joey Bosa is useless at this point. Anybody want to trade for Joey Bosa? I'm happy to do that. But no, I think yeah, really nice. I feel like it's like a lot of like little trades, right? Like little trades trying to round out the roster. It's looks okay to me. I don't really have much to say on that one. Let's look at Aaron Jones.
I think just one more piece on that, and it's talking more about just like my current roster construction for defensive ends. Is defensive ends are so streaky, and outside of like the top 10 guys, they're so streaky, and they can really catch fire at one point in the season, or maybe they can really catch fire on a matchup. So I like having good, just good pass rushers who have good pass rush metrics to kind of slot in on a favorable matchup. So I think Khalil Mack was definitely within that same vein of players who are good pass rushers who have good pass rush metrics who are still being productive and slot them in on good matchups.
And another thing that I think about, just zooming out just a little, is when we're looking into like into the playoffs. I've said this a few times in the podcast, and I do believe this that anyone can win at any time. But you want, if you're the underdog, you want more volatility, right?
Mm-hmm.
So And DNs provide that volatility very easily, very often, right? And so maybe it's just because Andrew won year one in such dramatic fashion, but I think about that often where you do want like those guys who can pop the fuck off and maybe even go on like a 3 game tear because even if your team isn't quite as good, those DNs can provide that extra oomph that maybe it doesn't happen all the time. Maybe it's a coin flip. Maybe it's a lot less than a coin flip, but you want that potential for those pop off guys. As much as you want some of the steady guys like the linebackers, you also need those pop off guys, especially if you are an underdog. And so I think getting a guy like Khalil Mack who obviously can pop the fuck off, it's a good idea, especially as like, you know, we're not the top dogs anymore, the top dogs at least. So I think you need a little bit of that in order to beat a guy like Adcock, especially if his team's, clicking on all cylinders. So
Yeah, I'm not out here with 4 top 15 wide receivers on my roster, so I gotta find points somewhere.
yeah. So Aaron Jones. So this was Pittman and a second for Aaron, 2027 second. How many 27 seconds do you have from people on other teams? Jesus.
Well, that was the flipping of ETN and the flipping
Ah,
of Pollard
okay,
that got me
okay.
those.
Interesting. So, okay, so the ETN trade, that was interesting because that was originally a 3-team trade. I can't remember what you were getting from Kyle in that 3-team trade.
Gosh, oh, it was Jamie and Sherwood, Tyrone Tracy, and Wandale
Okay, so
for
it
yeah,
wasn't for Aaron Jones in that at that time.
no.
Okay, so but you did end up basically flipping ETN into like a pseudo 3-way trade in this case.
Mhm.
Interesting. So you trade away Pittman, you trade away my second, and you get Aaron Jones and a third. I mean, Aaron Jones having a good year. What were you thinking? I can't even think right now who you have in your roster, but did you have a hole that you were looking to fill, or what was the situation?
Well, at the time of this trade, it was that I had Dave Montgomery, Jameer Gibbs, Alvin Kamara, and uh, Kareem Hunt as like my starting 4 running backs. And Kareem Hunt, once Pacheco comes back, he's getting relegated back to like the bench or back to wherever the fuck he came from. So I was like, I need to find someone who's a little bit more of a stable long term, or at least like within the next like 1 year, 2 year, that's like going to be able to kind of slate back in as I traded away ETN and Pollard. So Jones was really like within that. I was looking at Tyrone Tracy as kind of more of the youth guy and
Yeah.
the fun prospect, but Kyle wanted a little bit more. So I like Aaron Jones. I think I've been trying to trade for Aaron Jones the last couple of seasons. So
Yeah, I mean, it
that was
makes
kind of the
sense.
thought process.
Tyrone Tracy is going to fit within Kyle's window really well, so I'm not surprised that he was reluctant to get rid of him. Obviously, Aaron Jones is a guy that doesn't really make as much sense. Like he could fall off next year potentially. So I'm sure that Kyle was thinking of that as well. So I mean, I think Kyle got a good return here. Got a good like
Oh,
getting.
this is Andrew's team, by the way, that I traded with, not Kyle.
Oh shit, huh? Then right, because I was thinking Kyle with a 3-way trade with ETN. So so Andrew gets Pittman and a future second, pretty far future second. Do I love this for Andrew? I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's like not, these aren't like, it's not crazy one way or another for sure. Um, I didn't think about this trade until less than an hour ago, so I'm not really sure what my thoughts are necessarily. I
Do you
do,
want me to give Andrew's perspective on this?
yeah, what does Andrew say?
So Andrew's like main reason for trading away Jones was injury history, like coming up on a contract year, wanting to get value out of him because he has pretty good running back. So it was kind of like, and I don't think he was really high on Pittman. Like
Mm,
I talked to him about it, and he's like, yeah, it's more just like rolling into value than anything. Like I don't really like feel any type of way about Pittman. It's not like I really like Pittman per se. It's just more like this is probably like fair to fair value. So I was
that's
happy to
fair.
unload Pittman.
No.
Yeah.
I like I know some people in the league, they don't really want to trade for players that they don't really believe in necessarily, which is fair. I'm okay. I'm totally happy to trade for players that I don't love because I just feel like I'll just flip him soon. So uh, I kind of get that sense. I'm sure there's people who like Pittman enough so that, like Andrew, if he wants to trade Pittman, I'm sure he can make that trade. I mean, hey, there's a wide receiver for your dad as well. So there's all
Mm.
these potential wide receivers floating around. I think contenders, unless you're like upper echelon contender, I think we're all willing to swap pieces around and even trade for future picks and are looking to the future and trying to balance future versus present. It's kind of like a delicate walk. Um, and I don't know. That's probably the most fun part of Dynasty. So I love it.
Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of the reasoning for Andrew was getting off of Aaron Jones as like an injury risk
Yeah, hey, that's
type
fair.
player and
Yeah.
contract year coming up, and yeah,
I'm thinking about it more. I like it for Andrew. I think getting that future second, that second's only going to increase in value. And who knows, like my team might not be good in 2026. That could be a very nice pick. And our seconds, I love seconds. Everybody knows it. I think seconds are good value in our league. I think you can get a lot of good players in the second because of our defensive settings, and I think you can get good offensive players in the second actually, along with good defensive players. So it's just a nice round to be in. And then getting Pittman, yeah, looks good to me. Maybe I like it. Thinking about it here, maybe I like it slightly more for Andrew if I was like thinking about it in a bubble. But at the same time, it makes a lot of sense to get Aaron Jones this year, and it's a nice Vikings offense to be in. He's been producing well so far, and could definitely have some nice pop-off games in him still. So interesting
yep.
trade. We'll see how it goes. Last but not
JFN.
least, so we've gone for 52 minutes, and I think we'll use our hour. Uh, so we'll talk about JSN a little bit here, because I mean, last week or whatever, last time we did the podcast, I think I brought up JSN just more as a fun, I don't know, call back to last season. Like Sam doesn't have anymore. I didn't think we'd have as many conversations about JSN, but we probably need to talk about him having 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's 35 and a half points. I was thinking about like I think last time we were talking about him, I was saying, or maybe this was off. Maybe this wasn't on the podcast, but there's been the popular comparison between JSN and Adunze. A similar situation, same coordinator, um, but I was saying Adunze's already had a better game than a JSN's had in his entire career. I think this was a couple weeks ago. And
Mhm.
Adunze had another really nice game last week, despite some dysfunction in the Bears' offense. So I don't really put them at the same category. I still don't personally, just because there's still the draft capital difference and definitely some bias. I mean, no doubt. I try not to be, but as a Bears fan, there's going to be bias. But JSN finally put one big point in his favor in having a monster breakout game. So big props for JSN to finally do that. I mean, you could argue week 2, but it's not this type of game. So really interesting to see. Sam, what are you thinking?
I think to put a caveat on this performance, granted it's a fantastic performance, and I think it's. I was listening to some podcasts about how he was getting all these points and how he looked, and they were using him in the way that everyone thought the JSN should be used within an offense, where it's like more these drag routes and like concepts that are just like really playing to JSN strengths. So moving forward, if they continue to utilize him in that sense, I think he has a lot more standalone value than if he's like uh like screen merchant, like just kind of yardage type of production. But I mean, let's call out the elephant in the room, and you already pulled it up that DK Metcalf was out of this game, and his presence is definitely, it kind of limits what JSN can do when DK is out there, because DK is definitely, he profiles more as the X wide receiver. He gets a lot more of the targets when he's on the field. So it is going to be just a curious thing when everyone on the offense is healthy again, what the target shares are going to look like and just how they continue to use JSN.
Yeah, even if JSN's like really, the true wide receiver too, it's there's not many wide receivers that you're super, super happy with when they're the wide receiver two on their team with a true wide receiver one, right? Like what
Hmm.
are our big examples are with Justin Jefferson and Addison, Waddle with Tyreek, AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Famous examples, of course, like guys that could be easily wide receiver ones on other teams, but
Okay.
are, somewhat stuck, I guess, to some extent. Um, and passing is just down on the league overall. Not with the Seahawks, though. They are passing a lot. So, yeah, with the Seahawks offense, maybe it's possible. I don't know how much, real life success this Seahawks offense will have. I mean, they're kind of zigging when the rest of the NFL is zagging as far as like passing goes, right? So we'll kind of see. Um, However, it's such a good sign to see your second year wide receiver go into that wide receiver one role and be capable of putting in a performance like that. So
Yeah, definitely.
I'd be really happy about that. Who knows what happens with Metcalf? Latest news: Seahawks won't be trading DK Metcalf. I honestly did not know that that was even a consideration.
Yeah,
Uh,
neither did I.
so so I don't know. The story still has a lot to be written, but I will say I'm happy to see it. I'm not going to be rooting against anyone. I still probably think the JSN hype is like, I don't know, it's like a little culty thing. Like I don't quite get it. It just like so much. I don't know. It just seems like out of proportion compared to what we have actually seen from him. However, I'm happy to like when I actually see something from a guy, that's what I'm looking for. I'm actually wanting to see like real production, and good for him. We'll see how this
I think the
goes.
and truthers are beating their drum real hard right now. Where just I think everything as far as what people thought that JSN like excelled at, he did in this game. So I think a lot of people are really excited about him just continuing to get those type of touches that he has always excelled at and really made him special at Ohio State. So I mean, I love this for Gino. Gino is super underrated in my mind and is someone who can like actually throw these balls and get these guys the touches that they like that make them great, both with the DK and hopefully with JSN now. I think it only does good things for Gino.
See, I don't get the Geno thing either. Like, it's not like this offense is like particularly good, right? Like, are they like they're a little better than last year? Geno's throwing like a ton of interceptions. He's just throwing a ton in general.
Yeah.
The
Not
running
many
game's
touchdowns.
nice.
Lots of yards, not much touchdowns.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is this like, are we going to see a little more from this offense, or is it like it kind of feels like it's good for fantasy people? Like I'm hearing a lot of hype for the offense, but it's through fantasy channels, like
Mm-hmm.
fantasy, Reddit or podcasts or news or whatever. Um, it's not translating to as much NFL success as it is fantasy success, and that's always worrying because you don't know how long fantasy success can last without NFL success.
Yeah,
But
I mean, I think like when you watch the type of throws that Gino can make, I think he throws with some of the best of them. It's just that like offensive line is so fucking bad. He does not get a whole lot of time in the pocket. They're very like penalty ridden too, where their offensive line, in addition to getting a lot of sacks and a lot of pressures on Gino, they also just like get a lot of negative game scripts because of so many penalties. Like it just kind of is it's a tough situation. I think Gino does a good job in that offense. But if he were in an offense that wasn't so like heavily penalized and was a better offensive line, I think he would look a lot better.
Well, we'll see how that goes second half of the season. I think a lot of narratives are going to be written this next half of the season. It's going to be very, very fun. It's been a fun NFL season so far. As a Bears fan, it's been up and down, but
Oh my gosh.
but it has been a lot of fun, I will admit. And I'm looking forward to how our Dynasty League shakes out as well, especially with these playoffs coming up. So thanks for sticking with us, guys. I'm glad we got to JSN. Next week, special episode. Not really, it's just going to be a regular episode. I hope we can actually do it. I know we missed last week. We want to talk about Kyle and the strat of tanking, see if he's going to pull it out. Is he going to be as good as some of our best tankers? We're talking Sam and Adcock for sure. Or maybe it'll be less than good. I don't know. He has a lot of picks. He has to translate it. I'm looking forward to talking about that next week with Alec, who shall return. So, good night, guys, and we'll talk more next week, I guess. And hopefully, I'll be first place.
No.
You don't believe? All right.
I mean, it's not that I don't believe. I just,
All right. Good night, guys.